Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for the 33rd Sunday of Ordinary Time, according to the Gospel of Mark. Jesus said to his disciples, "During that period, after trials of every sort, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not shed its light, stars will fall out of the skies, and the heavenly hosts will be shaken. Then people will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. He will dispatch his messengers and assemble his chosen from the four winds, from the farthest bounds of earth and sky. Learn a lesson from the fig tree. Once the sap of its branches runs high and it begins to sprout leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see these things happening, you will know that he is near, even at the door. I assure you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. The heavens and the earth will pass away, but my words will not. As to the exact day or hour, no one knows it, neither the angels in heaven, nor even the Son, but only the Father." The Gospel of the Lord. A mountain towers over a beach 25 miles from the city of Accra in Ghana, Northwest Africa. Though it's only a 20-minute climb to the summit, it's a treacherous hike. The mountain is wreathed in black smoke from the fires that constantly burn on its slopes. It's not a mountain of rock and wood. It is a mountain of old clothes, our old clothes. Designer labeled jeans, sneakers, jackets, and t-shirts cover the ground. A dress that might have been worn a few times burns next to garbage and debris. We seldom think about what happens to the old clothes we donate to charity. We give the clothes we no longer wear, thinking they will have a second life with someone who needs them. Most of the time, however, the clothes end up in landfills like the burning refuse site at Kapon near the Ghanaian coast. Every year, the United States exports more than 1 billion pounds of used clothing, more than the world's second-hand clothing markets in underdeveloped nations can ever hope to use. More than 40% of the clothes we donate ends up in burning mountains of trash near African cities. The mountain is a living sign of senseless American consumerism. We Americans buy 5 times more clothes than we actually wear. On average, we wear an article of clothing 7 times before we dispose of it. Our addiction to the latest has led to fast fashion, clothing that is overproduced quickly and cheaply to keep up with the constantly changing trends. And most fast fashion ends up in places thousands of miles away, like the Kapon landfill, where it will burn, creating noxious chemicals that people will breathe and that will pollute water sources, leading to outbreaks of cholera. Mount Designer Label is a sign that we cannot buy our way out of sustainability, and that we need to rethink what we buy and why we buy. Our good intentions are contributing to an environmental disaster. Other kinds of environmental disasters have filled too many headlines in recent months and years. In fact, you have to admit that many of the news stories that have come out of the United Nations Climate Change Conference currently going on have been truly apocalyptic. That word comes from the Greek and means to uncover or to reveal. The stories have revealed the many ways that conditions all over the globe will go from bad to worse if we do not immediately take serious steps to lower our production and use of fossil fuels. Of course, we have already seen plenty of evidence in the wildfires, drought, increased temperatures, melting glaciers and permafrost, worsening storms and floods that have become regular occurrences both near and far away. As I heard these news stories, I could not help but see the parallel between their dark predictions and the apocalyptic tone of today's gospel reading and others we will hear in the next few weeks. Jesus is using stark, symbolic language, as he often does, in an attempt to get our attention. As our church year draws to an end, these readings call us to pause and reflect, much as many people do when the calendar year draws to an end. The purpose of these readings and our reflection on them is not to call us to fear and trembling, but to action. And the question to ask, the criterion by which to measure ourselves, is always the same, the one given to us by Jesus. How am I becoming a more loving person? Am I becoming a more loving person? To the degree that I am, give thanks to God and to those around me who support me in being a more loving person. You never have to wait to Thanksgiving to give thanks. To the degree that I am not becoming a more loving person, what needs to change? What actions can I take? If this sounds a bit like making New Year's resolutions, it is, and just in time. 2 weeks from today, on the first Sunday of Advent, we will begin our new liturgical year. And what better way to begin it than with an honest self-assessment, giving thanks for everything possible, forgiving ourselves and others for all the rest, and resolving to be at least a bit more loving as the new church year begins. And every climate conference offers us a great question with which to start our reflection. You who are, or someday may be, parents and grandparents, what kind of world do you want to bequeath to your children and grandchildren? However you answer that, I rather doubt that you want to leave them a mess. Wouldn't it be a sign of your love for them to incorporate into your family routines some of the many well-known practices or practices for preserving and improving our environment? Wouldn't it be a sign of your love for those beyond your family, especially those living in vulnerable areas of the globe, to show some concern for their homes and well-being before they are lost to rising sea levels, catastrophic storms, and other truly apocalyptic events? Today, and through the next few weeks, we will hear a consistent scriptural message calling us to wake up, be attentive, learn a lesson from fig trees and countless other signs of nature, and make changes while we still can. Far too often, we have been taught that sin and salvation is an individual me and Jesus affair. But clearly that is not the message Jesus is teaching. We are part of the human family, members of the body of Christ. The effects of our actions and inactions do not end with our isolated selves. The more loving each of us is, the more loving the world becomes, and the more real the reign of God becomes. Unfortunately, the opposite is also true, as every day's news stories remind us. The signs of future catastrophes are all around us. We, all of us, face economic, and environmental disasters of our own making that call for the wisdom and foresight of God's vision. We're called to realize that we hold the power to redeem our deeply divided world and restore our broken earth if we embrace the gospel spirit of humility, selflessness, and generosity. The catastrophic images in today's gospel challenge us to think and act for the common good and not our personal or national interests alone. Change, sometimes frightening, often traumatic, always difficult, is part of Jesus' call to all of us. He promises that if we calibrate our moral and ethical compasses to the values of the gospel, we'll be able to cope with the changes of perspective and action required to restore and recreate our world. Obviously, we cannot single-handedly eliminate environmental degradation any more than we can single-handedly eliminate poverty, prejudice, sickness, or so many other social ills. But each of us can do something, and probably several somethings. We are used to Jesus speaking to us through the scriptures. Do you think it is possible that this week Jesus has a message especially for you? Thanks for listening.